Welcome to Making Sense of the Madness. I am Jason Burmis, and we got a hell of a show for you today. We've got documentary filmmaker Joel Gilbert with us, and I've been a big fan of his work for some time. He brought us Dreams of My Real Father and Trump, the Art of the Insult, among others. His new one focuses on Michelle Obama 2024. Roger Stone's been talking about this. Joel Gilbert's been talking about it for a little bit longer. Buckle up and get ready to make sense of the madness after this.
They could run Michelle Obama, and if they do...
Welcome Michelle Obama!
Michelle Obama is the most popular woman in America.
You know I hate politics.
You can forget about the disclaimer. I'm convinced that Michelle Obama is running for president in 2024.
Systemic racism, pepper spray, and rubber bullets on peaceful protesters.
She's following the exact same formula that Barack did to become president. Michelle was the keynote speaker at the 2020 Democrat convention, just like Barack was in 2004. Barack once ran a voter registration organization. Now, so does Michelle.
That's how we change America.
Also, Barack Obama based his candidacy on his personal story. Michelle has done the exact same thing. But like Barack, Michelle tells a life story that is more fiction than fact.
Maybe somebody's going to discover that I shouldn't be here.
Now, come along on an investigation into the real Michelle Obama and her plan for power. I found out Michelle's father worked for the Democrat Party machine.
My father, he was a precinct captain in Chicago. People would come for money.
It turns out Michelle was never a part of the black community.
In that household, there was fear.
You talk like a white girl.
You could get your butt kicked if you talked like a white girl. What was going on in the 70s was what we called white flight.
The only person doing white flight in the 1970s was Michelle Robinson.
You're told by a school counselor you're not Princeton material.
You're black, maybe you're stretching.
Michelle was no victim of racism. In fact, Michelle has been running from the black community her whole life.
Hyde Park is the best neighborhood.
And Michelle sold out the black community working for the mayor of Chicago.
This is turning into a ghetto. You better run.
They just take our home like this, yeah.
And she sold them out as a hospital executive, kicking poor black patients out of the ER.
Yeah, like that.
I learned that to get power, Michelle pretends to be part of the black community she exploited all her life.
Lo and behold, trying to pay your own rent.
Imposter syndrome.
All-out war between the pigs and us.
And it turns out Michelle's close friend and mentor was an anti-American radical.
The politics of fear.
Because of fear.
Your fear. They want you to be afraid of change. We're working to change the future of this nation. We need you. Are you in?
Fundamentally transforming the United States of America.
And to transform America, Michelle plans to rule America come Election Day 2024.
And without further ado is the filmmaker behind Michelle Obama 2024, her real life story and plan for power, Joel Gilbert. Joel, thank you so much for joining us. Now, obviously, you're no stranger to the Barack star and his family. You did Dreams of My Real Father, and I recommend everybody go check that out. It's rather excellent. You seem to be ahead of the curve on Michelle Obama 2024. We're about a year out from the election. As far as we know, Zombie J is still in the driver's seat and supposedly going to run for president. It doesn't seem like we're going to have traditional debates. How would they slip somebody like Michelle Obama into the process and basically anoint her as the presidential candidate?
Well, I think you're correct that nobody wants Joe Biden, first of all. The Democrats don't want him. They think he'll bring down the ticket. All the down ballot Democrats are terrified he'll cause them to lose elections throughout the country. He's got such a terrible record on the economy, on inflation, on the border, foreign policy, you name it. Nobody wants him. They don't want him now. But certainly they don't believe that he could win an election against Trump, and he certainly couldn't even serve another 4 years. So there's serious problems in the Democrat Party with a total lack of support for Joe Biden, first of all. Now, we have a December 23rd deadline coming up to get on the primary ballots. Anyone who wants to be on the Democrat primary ballots has to get in their signatures by December 23rd for most states. So I believe it's as simple as Michelle Obama could declare for president and will declare for president. I'm predicting sometime in November, which would give her plenty of time to get her signatures together, get on all the state ballots, raise hundreds of millions of dollars, because she is the most popular Democrat. She's got a nationwide organization, the Obama Organization, Organizing for Action. The Obamas just have to flip a switch and they can rally behind Michelle Obama. Joe Biden really doesn't have to drop out. It's not like, Michelle has to be somehow anointed. Biden can run all he wants and he'll get trounced in the primaries. I think the Democrats actually had set it up for Michelle Obama by moving the first primary out of Iowa, where she would have had to campaign in 99 counties. They moved their first primary to South Carolina, where half the Democrat Party voter electorate there are African American. It's also a state that Michelle claims as her adopted home state because her grandparents are from South Carolina. She used to go there for family reunions growing up. And of course, the Democrat Party placed their Democrat National Convention in Michelle's hometown, Chicago, of all places. So I think it couldn't be more obvious that this is set up for Michelle Obama, and that's how I think it'll go down.
So you're talking about the movement to South Carolina to get her the primary votes. If this indeed does happen in November, we're still not going to have any kind of a debate, and it would be a one-on-one contest between her and Biden. That's what you're suggesting.
Yeah, and I don't think it's much of a contest. Michelle is hugely popular. As you saw from the movie trailer, I think she's been working on the different voter groups for years. She's doing exactly what Barack did to run for president. She's copying the steps that Barack made. Michelle was the keynote speaker who introduced Joe Biden at the 2020 convention, just like Obama introduced John Kerry at the 2004 Democrat convention. The keynote speaker slot is the one they give to the person they think will be the nominee at the next convention. Barack wrote 2 autobiographies, Dreams from My Father and The Audacity of Hope, before he ran for president. The reason a relatively young person writes an autobiography for politics is to create a political document that changes their history. It covers up the bad things they did and creates fake stories that the media will pick up on. So the media doesn't have to even interview them. They can just refer to the autobiographies. So sure enough, Michelle wrote 2 autobiographies, just like Barack, Becoming, her bestseller in 2018. And she went on a big world book tour. And she just released late last year, The Light We Carry, another autobiography. And both of those are on Netflix as movies. And of course, Barack had a voter registration organization in Chicago called Project Vote before he ran for president. There was Michelle Obama. She started When We All Vote. She got $26 million from the Soros gang, and she's been running around the country. You can look on her Twitter every day. She's registering people to vote. So she's following in the path of Barack, and the Democrat Party, I think, has set it up for her. And she's been working on for years these constituent groups of women and minorities. Just look at her Twitter account. It's all outreach to women and minority groups. And I think that there won't be much of a contest. It'll be 2 people. You don't need a debate. Michelle's a household name. And, I think Biden will drop out at some point, but doesn't have to drop out for Michelle to enter the race.
So I want to rewind to what you just said about the keynote speaker in 2020. In 2004, when they granted Obama this access, he still had not even won a national election for Senate. He was actually in that election cycle. And as you said, he would be running in 2008. Well, the Senate seat is a 6-year term. They fast-tracked this guy that 3 years into that term, he announced his presidency and was really promoted by the mainstream media. The only one that they even wanted to have him contend with in the mainstream at that time was Hillary Clinton. I think there was a small amount of an actual power struggle there. I would suggest that Gavin Newsom may also have his eye on the presidency in 2024. Could there be a power struggle there? Could he throw his hat into the mix?
Yeah, let's talk about Gavin Newsom. He's my governor here in California. He's done an absolutely terrible job in terms of taxes, pollution, uh, just about everything, crime, everything you can think of. It's just been a disaster. He's relatively new to the national stage. Most people don't know who he is if you're not from California. But once you kind of take a look at him, you realize he's a very snarky kind of used sales cars salesman kind of personality, very similar to a younger Joe Biden. He'll say just about anything. He recites far left Democrat talking points with a smile, and he can't really relate to voters. So I think my prediction is Gavin Newsom is kind of positioning himself for the vice presidential slot under Michelle Obama, because just like Donald Trump didn't have executive government experience and teamed up with Mike Pence, who was a former governor, it would make sense for Michelle to have a former governor as her vice presidential candidate. Now, don't forget the Democrat Party is pretty much done with white males, and Gavin Newsom is a white male, so he kind of doesn't fit what they're going for. And this has developed over the years. You've seen how the Democrat Party have jettisoned people like Andrew Cuomo, and most of their candidates are ethnic or minority candidates. That's who they promote. And the reason for that is that Democrats need about 90 to 95% of the black vote to get their candidates elected. And Donald Trump was so successful with minority communities by delivering for them what the Democrats had promised for 60 years but never delivered, that it was a huge threat to the Democrat voting base. Donald Trump delivered school choice, a robust economy, jobs, prison reform, all the things Democrats had promised. So that was a huge threat to them. And that's why when Biden got into office, his handlers appointed blacks to just about every high-profile position they could. UN ambassador, defense secretary, head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, minority leader in the House, press secretary, on and on. And their message to black voters is rather insulting. It's, we look like you, so you should vote for us. But in fact, the Democrats have never shown that they have the interests of the black community at heart. Barack Obama did nothing for the black community when he was president. Everything got worse. Jobs, economy, illegals coming and taking jobs. So Michelle Obama just checks all the boxes. She's a black female. She allows the media to use their two favorite weapons to attack people that criticize far left Democrat policies. Instead of saying, you know, you don't agree with this policy, they can just say, well, you must be racist or sexist if you don't agree with Michelle. So she's an incredible weapon to have at the top of the ticket. And Gavin Newsom just does not fit what the Democrats are doing today, while Michelle has this huge cult of personality. I went to her interview she did with Oprah that's now on Netflix here at YouTube Theater in Los Angeles last December. And I went there 2 hours early thinking I would talk to a few people and look around before the crowd showed up. When I was there 2 hours early, people were lined up for miles, even though they had tickets, because they wanted to be part of this event with Michelle Obama. It was like a campaign rally. So she's hugely popular, but she does have vulnerabilities, and that's what I write about and show in my film and book, Michelle Obama 2024, because her real life story is much different than the fabricated story she's been pushing for years.
And that's what's so effective about your films, for those that have not seen them, is that you challenge the narratives, like you said, that are presented through the mainstream media and these revampings of personality through on-the-ground detective work. And before we get into what you did with Michelle Obama, I think that we have to point out that you did amazing work with Barack Obama, and really the idea and the evidence that a guy named Frank Marshall Davis, who Barack Obama was speaking about in college about his experiences with the guy, is more than likely his biological father. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, I made a film in 2012. I went out to Hawaii twice and talked to a lot of people, which was 2 times more than all the mainstream media put together, went out to Hawaii to check out Barack's story that he wrote about it in his book, Dreams from My Father. And I knew that in his best-selling autobiography, which Obama based his candidacy on, he based his candidacy on his personal story. My father's from Africa, my mother's from Kansas, I'm going to bring us all together. That was the story that he pushed and the media pushed for him. But in his book, Dreams from My Father, he talked constantly about this guy named Frank. Frank is throughout the entire book. He's the most talked about person. Obama hangs out with him. He talks about how he's a writer and he wants to emulate him. Even after Frank dies, everywhere Barack goes, he goes to Chicago, he goes to Washington, he's always talking about Frank. And so I looked up this Frank guy. It turns out he was Frank Marshall Davis, who was one of the original black Bolsheviks, one of the original black communists out of Chicago from the 1930s. And he was a member of the Communist Party USA. He was ordered to go to Hawaii by Comintern, Communist International, where he became a Soviet agent and helped to start a dock workers strike in Hawaii with the idea of expelling US naval forces from Hawaii. This is before statehood in the 40s. So he was a Russian agent, and he was hauled before the House Committee on Un-American Activities and asked if he was a member of the Communist Party. He pleaded the fifth. And Davis stayed in Hawaii after his dock workers strike failed and was a writer for a communist newspaper called the Honolulu Record. So I believe I presented a mountain of evidence that this man who raised Barack Obama and radicalized him was in fact his real biological father as well, because he looks just like Obama, looks just like Frank Marshall Davis. Obama looks nothing like the Kenyan Obamas whatsoever. So I believe that the Kenyan student Barack Obama was used by the family to cover up an affair between Obama's mother, Ann Dunham, and Frank Marshall Davis, who was married at the time. And beyond the biology, that I think it is the biological father, I established the radicalization into this communist socialist worldview that makes Obama a red diaper baby. He was a child of an American communist, same as all his buddies in Chicago. David Axelrod, both his parents were communist journalists out of New York. Valerie Jarrett, her father-in-law, Vernon Jarrett, worked for a communist newspaper with Frank Marshall Davis in Chicago, with the Chicago Defender. So they're all very connected to this deep-rooted history of American communism. And I think when Barack ran for president, he ran as a mainstream candidate. He said, I'm going to bring us all together. I'm going to follow the Constitution. Marriage is between man and God and a woman, very mainstream. But as soon as he got elected, 5 days before he got elected, he said, we're going to fundamentally transform the United States of America. Everybody just clapped. They kind of didn't know what he was talking about. But as soon as he got elected, he threw the voters under the bus and pursued a radical socialist agenda that nobody voted for. And I think my film, Dreams from My Real Father, stands up to this day to show the real Barack Obama, and it's not the character he created in his book, Dreams from My Father, where he claimed his father was from Africa. The real Barack Obama is a wannabe radical, somebody that wanted to live up to his idols and mentors, like his real father, who was a Soviet agent.
Well, no doubt a narrative construct. I mean, he was Barry Soetoro for years, and for good reason. And on top of that, when you talk about Frank Marshall Davis and his outward appearance to Barack Obama, how about they sound exactly alike as well? We got to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk more about this film and book and your deep dive into Michelle Obama, because as of now, I think you're the only guy that's really done any investigative journalism whatsoever as to where this woman came from and how she was brought up. We'll be back after this with more Making Sense of the Madness.
Banks are supposed to be the safest placeholders for cash in the world, but in 2022 that changed. The Federal Reserve pulled out $2.5 trillion of liquidity out of the banks, and the Fed also changed the requirements so banks don't need to keep any funds on hand. This means banks are starved for liquidity and have now become very dangerous places to hold your assets. Get out of the system with the world's safest and most private assets, silver and gold. Call Kirk Elliott, PhD at 720-605-3900.
What should people know about that whole blow up with Project Veritas?
I read a few people wrong, and that's my fault, but I learned from that, and I think I'll be a more effective messenger as a result of that. That'll free me up to do the next chapter, the next stage of my evolution, which is OMG, which is decentralizing journalism, and sometimes things happen for a reason. That's my goal, that's my mission, and I didn't ask for that mission. I never thought that would be my mission. It just has become my mission, and I'm excited about it.
We are back with documentary filmmaker Joel Gilbert. And Joel, you know, I'm an open-minded guy. I keep up on the alternative media and the quote-unquote conspiracy theories out there. And I would say it's hard to get away from the quote-unquote Big Mike conspiracy about Michelle Obama. And every time I hear about this stuff, I'm like, there's got to be somebody out there that has tracked this woman back to her high school, her middle school, her father, her parents, where she actually comes from. And you are that person. So let's take us on a journey as to who Michelle Obama really is and where she really comes from.
Well, we can dispel, I can show you a picture. You might be able to see this. This is Michelle this is her dance class at 16 years old. It's from her yearbook photo of Whitney Young. And as you can see, she's obviously female. So I do hear that a lot. People ask, is she Big Mike? And you might remember this came about because Joan Rivers, the comedian, was asked by TMZ. They asked her, will there ever be a gay president in America? And she said, oh, well, we have one now. It's Obama, and Michelle's transgender. Now, that's obviously her cutting edge sense of humor. She's making an outrageous joke. And I think the internet and conservatives kind of picked up on that because Michelle's had 15 years of 100% positive publicity, hundreds of magazine covers, hundreds of talk shows. There's never been anybody to investigate or say anything negative about Michelle. So I think that's why people picked up on it. But I can assure you it's not true. Michelle is always female and has always been female, and it's just a silly joke. Now, Michelle is a total phony. I can assure you of that from my research, which you showed earlier. This is both a book version and a film version of Michelle Obama 2024. And you can actually watch the movie right now on salemnow.com. You can live stream or on Amazon Prime Video. And then the book version is on Amazon.com along with the DVD. And this is a deep dive. It's the first critical look into Michelle's history, her life story, which no one has ever done. Now, like Barack, Michelle has presented to the public a pretty fabricated life story in order to get people to give her power. Her life story pretty much goes like this. She says, well, I grew up on the south side of Chicago. Even in her documentary, Becoming, the film version on Netflix, at the beginning, she says, I'm from the south side of Chicago, and that's all you need to know about me. Well, when she said that, I realized there's probably a lot I need to know about her other than that. And of course, it turns out Michelle's not from the south side of Chicago. She's trying to create some romantic idea of struggle from a difficult area. Michelle grew up in South Shore, which was an exclusive community on Lake Michigan. Jesse Jackson's had a beautiful giant mansion in South Shore for years. He never said he was from the south side. So Michelle's not even from the south side of Chicago. And then she talks about how she grew up facing difficulties from racism and being held back in life because of her skin color and being so difficult, and the attitudes of white people toward her, so on. So that's kind of her story. She wants you to sympathize. Mostly it's directed at minority and black voters. She's trying to trick them and manipulate them into thinking, I'm one of you. I'm just an ordinary black person. I experienced the same things that you did. Well, I went to Chicago. I interviewed 3 of her boyfriends, high school and elementary school classmates and teachers and principals, her thesis advisor at Princeton University. I talked to Michelle's mother. So I really talked to a huge number of people. I pulled files from the archives at the city of Chicago where Michelle worked for the mayor. I got her file. Tremendous amount of information from the high school she went to. And a completely different story of Michelle Obama emerges that she wishes to cover up. And it revolves around the fact that Michelle had a terrible relationship with the black community in Chicago. It started as a kid. Her and her brother refused to study with other black kids. Instead of going to for example, an all-black high school 1 block from their house, South Shore High School, her and her brother went an hour and a half away to go to a Catholic school and a magnet school to study with whites. Even though they weren't even Catholic, they refused to study with black kids. Michelle had no black friends growing up. She talks about her hero was Mary Tyler Moore. She watched the Brady Bunch every day. And as you saw in the trailer, Michelle was afraid to go out of her house because the black kids would beat her up. They would accuse her of acting white and talking white. Michelle even writes in her book about getting into a fist fight with a girl who called her an Oreo, meaning it's a racial insult. You're black on the outside, but you're really a white girl on the inside. So Michelle had nothing to do with the black community, shared no experiences with them except that she got beat up by them. And then I traced Michelle's professional career in Chicago, where she got her revenge on the black community for how they treated her as a kid. Michelle worked for the mayor of Chicago. She was the assistant planning commissioner working under Mayor Richard Daley with Valerie Jarrett. And Michelle's job was to kick 20,000 black people out of their homes at the projects at Cabrini Green. They knocked down the projects and gave away the land to Democrat donor developers like Tony Rezko. And Michelle would tell the black people she made homeless, she'd say, "This is good for you. This is better for you." The white liberals, whenever they had a problem with black people, they couldn't hire a white person to do the dirty work. So Michelle was always that black person who would make a lot of money doing the dirty work of white liberals. Having proven how callous she was toward the black community, Michelle was hired by the University of Chicago Medical Center to solve their problem with the black community. Blacks were showing up at the emergency room at the University of Chicago. A lot of them didn't have good insurance. And even though it was a public facility that got federal dollars, they were losing money. So they hired Michelle to start the Southside Health Collaborative, it was called. And Michelle's job was, if people were black and showed up at the emergency room, she would kick you out. She'd put you in a van and dump you back on the South Side at a crappy clinic. And I went to some of those clinics. You can see how horrible they are. So Michelle made hundreds of thousands of dollars from white liberals denying access to healthcare to the black community. So Michelle's history of the black community is one of exploitation, one of hatred, one of fear. But as a politician, she creates this phony story that, oh, I suffered from racism, I'm just one of you. It's all phony to manipulate the black community to get their votes and get power from them. One story you saw in the trailer, she's been telling for years about how her high school counselor, she said, racially profiled her because she was applying to Princeton University and said, "You're black, maybe you're stretching." Well, I talked to her, high school counselors, and the one that she's referring to was a black lady named Nan King who died in 2005. And there's no way she would have racially profiled Michelle. The worst thing she could have said is, "Michelle, you've got very low test scores. Maybe you should apply to some backups in case you don't get into Princeton." That's the worst thing she could have said, but she would not have racially profiled her. So this is Michelle's biggest weakness, is her terrible relationship with the black community and the lies that she tells to try to trick them. I think black voters are no fools. And if they understood from my movie and film and book that Michelle exploited the black community and hated them, they would not support her politically.
We got to take a break, but when we come back, I want to go even further back into history, because you just alluded to this person went to what? Private school, got esteemed position. So obviously grew up in a life of some type of privilege. And in the trailer, we saw the position that her father held as a top police officer. We're going to get into that and more when we come back. Make sure to go check out Michelle Obama 2024, streaming on Amazon Prime right now. Back after this with more Making Sense of the Madness.
My employees and I are excited to announce it's our 20th anniversary, and to celebrate, we're bringing you a limited edition MyPillow. The Giza Elegance MyPillow is made with the most amazing cotton, 2-inch pipe gusset, comes in 4 custom loft levels, and it's machine washable and dryable.
When I got my pillow, I'm asleep almost immediately. I stay asleep at night and I wake up more well-rested in the morning.
My patented fill adjusts to your exact individual needs and helps keep your neck supported and aligned. That's why we've been around for 20 years, because My Pillow works.
Go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get your limited edition 20th anniversary My Pillow queen size. Retails for $69.98, now only $19.98. That's right, only $19.98.
With my 60-day money-back guarantee, you have nothing to lose. Sleep well, America!
We are back with Joel Gilbert. And Joel, you were talking about the beginnings of the Michelle Obama story and how it was so contradictory. Let's talk about her parents.
Sure. Well, Michelle's father was a precinct captain in Chicago, not a policeman, as you said, a precinct captain. His job was to convince black voters to vote for the white Democrat Party machine. And in return for that work, he got a patronage job. That means it's a job that's doled out by the Democrat Party machine. That's an easy job as an inspector at the water department. So he would show up and look around and say, oh, that looks good. You know, he didn't really have a serious job because it was a patronage job that was given to him for his political work. So Michelle talks about in her book going around from age 4. She would go around to the homes of all the black people in the neighborhood where her father would try to get them to vote for the white Democrats. She talked about how they would ask for money and her father would deliver. So she's been doing politics from a very, very young age. She grew up in Jesse Jackson's house. That was one of her few black friends. She had a black friend if that black friend was an elitist. For example, even at Princeton University, she had a black friend whose father was one of the top officials in the government of the Bahamas. So that was her black friends, were people that were elites only. So she was friends with Jesse Jackson's daughter, Santita, when Jackson was preparing to run for president in the early 80s. And so she spent a lot of time at Jesse Jackson's house. So Michelle is really a political animal. She's done politics. Her family's in politics. She married a politician. Michelle married her father. She married Barack knowing he wanted to be in politics. So it's a very elitist political family. And she was rejected by the black community. They saw her for what she was, and that's why they would beat her up. And that's why Michelle refused to study with them, both her and her brother. They were doing white flight. Michelle lies when she says in the 70s she saw white people moving out of her neighborhood. It's a complete lie. All the whites had moved out of South Shore by 1965. Michelle was only 1 year old. And Michelle didn't move into South Shore until she was 6 years old. And at that time, all the whites had moved out. And the only people that did white flight in the 70s was Michelle and her brother. They refused to study with blacks. They ran away from the schools to study only with whites. So that's the story of her early childhood and her family. It's something that people just don't know about. And if you look at her autobiography, she doesn't talk about any of that. She does a little bit mention how the kids would beat her up, but she doesn't really give the big picture.
So what's really interesting is this child was raised to be a political animal almost from her inception. And like you said, she married a politician. How does that happen? How does she meet Barack Obama, and how do they kind of unify into this political power couple?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Now, by the way, Michelle is a better politician than Barack, because she grew up in a political family, which Barack did not. Michelle's a better politician. She's a better speaker. She comes across more authentic. Her Harvard professor, Charles Ogletree, who was also a professor of Barack at Harvard, said between the two of them, he thought it would have been Michelle that would have run for president and not Barack. So she is a very, very good politician in terms of her skills, speaking skills, everything. The way they met was Michelle was working at Sidley Austin Law Firm. And I'll do a quick segue. She worked there for 2 years with none other than Bernardine Dorn, who was one of the heads of the Weather Underground, a domestic terrorist whose husband, Bill Ayers, is suspected to have actually been very close to Barack and wrote his book as a ghostwriter, Dreams from My Father. But Michelle was very close to Bernardine Dorn, was one of her best friends, and her and Barack would go to their houses for dinner about once a week in the 90s for years. So you can't overstate the amount of influence that this couple of domestic terrorists had on the Obamas. So much so that I show in my film that all of Michelle's America bashing back in 2008, you might remember, every night she would speak to these huge crowds about how bad America is. You can't pay your mortgage, you can't afford food, don't get sick in this country. All of that comes directly from Bernardine Dohrn, word for word. Bernardine Dohrn used to talk about the politics of fear. It's this theory that we're all afraid of each other, and all our politics comes from fear. Michelle, word for word, talked about fear, we're all afraid, directly from Bernardine Dohrn. So that relationship is exposed in my film and book. Now, the way that they met was Barack was an intern at this law firm, and Michelle was assigned to kind of be his mentor at this law firm. I probably think that Bill Ayers had some hand in getting Barack that internship. But I think they both fulfilled a need that the other one had. Barack, we've learned, broke up with his Asian girlfriend, specifically in writing because she wasn't black. Barack never had any black friends in Hawaii. He didn't know any black people. He had no common experience with black people. He had no black girlfriends. He didn't know any black people. His roommates in college were Pakistanis. So he saw that for politics, though, he needed this core voter group of black voters. So he actually told his girlfriend they were going to break up because he needed to meet a black woman. So Obama was consciously looking for someone who was black for politics. So for Michelle, it allowed Obama to feel more black and to be more black with a black girlfriend or future wife. Michelle, on the other hand, didn't like black people. She was afraid of them. They beat her up. She exploited them working in these jobs for white liberals. And she moved to Hyde Park. She always had white friends and lived with white people. I don't think she liked being black. So because Barack was biracial, I think it made Michelle feel more white. Here's a man who's half white with a white family. And so I think they each got something out of that attraction. Barack wanted to feel more black and she wanted to feel more white, I think is how their relationship started. But they both had the background and influence of these political radicals like Frank Marshall Davis and Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dohrn for Michelle. And a lot of people don't know, I also expose in the film and book that Michelle was a community organizer in Chicago, just like Barack, for 3 years. Michelle headed up something called the Public Allies, which was a radical group that would recruit people down on their luck. If you just got out of prison, if you're a high school dropout, they would give you a job in the bureaucracy of government for 10 months. And one day a week, you would be radicalized at the Public Allies offices with these socialist Marxist ideas. Michelle even brought Bernardine Dohrn in to lecture to her subjects. And the idea was that after 10 months, these people would get a job in the bureaucracy on the lower levels and then over the years work their way up. It's kind of like the definition of the deep state of taking over the bureaucracy with these radical people. So that's what Michelle was into. And together they were very effective. Barack ran for a state senate. Michelle was his treasurer. She was all on board. She was the treasurer for his first campaign. So she really helped him politically. They're not different from the Clintons in that the husband in the relationship was kind of a frail, friendly guy who was kind of disorganized. And the wife was the one that pushed him and said, you got to see this person, you got to do this, go see that person. Michelle got a job at the mayor's office, I think, to get connections for Barack. That's how Barack met Tony Rezko, the criminal real estate developer that gave Barack so much money for his campaigns. And so Michelle was very instrumental in creating the politician Barack Obama.
Well, I'm really glad that you compared them to the Clintons because that is clearly also a marriage of political convenience. I mean, obviously, there are other aspects through the years, but I think that's what solidifies it. And even if you look at the fictional series, House of Cards, it's largely talked about that it's modeled after that Clinton relationship. And they actually did fictionalize the Barack star and his wife in kind of a controversial manner on cable television as well. They didn't portray them as they had normally been portrayed in the media. Do you think that that was the facade cracking a little bit, or do you think that was just a little bit more promotion with some kind of a, I guess, fictional spin?
I think that was more of a spin to get people interested in watching it. The Clintons are an intriguing couple. We saw how it played out over the years. And certainly the Obamas are like the Clintons. They're never going away. And I think they seek power. The Obamas, even though they have a climate-denying summer home in Martha's Vineyard with all the other rich white elites right on the beach there, they never left Washington, D.C. They have a house in Washington. Barack's been consulting for years during the Trump administration, even to this day, with members of Congress, members of the party. He's clearly still the leader of the Democrat Party. And I think they're going to flip a switch for Michelle because I think they're very eager to get back into the White House.
We got to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about what that 2024 run looks like. Who's Michelle Obama going to be running against in the first place? That and beyond is making sense of the madness. Remember to check the film out over at Amazon Prime right now. We'll be back after this.
Sean Morgan here with an AMP Consumer Report. You know, big corporations are buying up local electronics repair stores and shutting them down. But I'm here with one Patriot business owner, Susan, who's an electronics repair business who has survived and thrived in Phoenix, Arizona. Can you tell me about what devices you repair? How does it work for them to send it to you in the mail from Phoenix? And you also do data recovery and OS, is that right?
Well, as far as mailing in, they can just simply, they're perfect good packaging for iPhones or any kind of mobile devices and iPads and laptops. They're very easily shippable. I think desktops will be more of a problematic. I rarely repair desktops. Most people have laptops. When they come in, I immediately diagnose, order the part. If there are iPhones, we have all the parts in stock, so it'll be fixed and shipped the same day.
And finally, the OS support. What's that all about?
The OS support means, my experience has been most of the time when people are having slowness in their devices or it freezing or the video goes out. Often I find out to be having multiple malware installed on their laptop. I remove the malware and OS comes automatically with its own malware and problem solved. And also I do have some level of tune-up to do to the software to speed it up.
So it sounds like if someone has a problem with their electronics device, you probably have a solution. So if you want to talk to Susan about your broken device or data recovery issue, you can call her or email her with the information on the screen or below the video.
We are back with filmmaker Joel Gilbert. And Joel, you're saying it's Michelle Obama in 2024. Who is Michelle Obama going to be running against? Obviously, you've done a lot of work on Trump, the art of the insult. He is way ahead in the polls. However, they're currently trying to put him in prison. And I think a lot of people are being naive in the idea that they won't put him in prison for some time for these trumped up charges, pun intended. If it's not Trump, the establishment is now pushing Nikki Haley. Vivek Ramaswamy seems to be the other choice. And now we have RFK Jr. via the independent ticket. All these things are happening 2024 style. What are we actually going to see?
Look, obviously, it looks like we're obviously going to have Trump, the nominee for the Republicans, unless somehow the Democrats, with their 4 or 5 different cases and charges and felonies, are going to convict him somewhere of something and attempt to put him in prison, though that won't stop him from being on the ballots. But they're trying to take him out. And you got to believe that the forces behind Joe Biden, behind this radical agenda of the Democrats, are hell-bent and dedicated to making sure he cannot run for president. Or if he does run for president, that they find a way to make sure he loses. And that's what Michelle Obama fulfills for the Democrats, because if we have an election between Trump and Biden and they say Joe Biden won again, no one's going to believe it. It's unbelievable, and there'll be a lot of trouble. If Michelle Obama wins, they say Michelle Obama won, you'd say, well, I guess I believe that because she's so popular. She brings along plausibility to someone who wants to stuff ballots and harvest ballots and do all kind of election shenanigans. Michelle makes it all believable. You pretty much probably would not even question it if she won. And if you did question it, it must be because you're racist or sexist. So she brings a lot to the table for those who want to make sure that the Barack Obama agenda that was started in 2008 and interrupted for a few years by Trump, continues for many years to come. If I was Donald Trump, I would start opening a can of worms for Michelle Obama and put her on the defensive. He could say things like, and tweet things like, Michelle Obama, are you going to apologize for what you did to the black community in Chicago? Michelle Obama, how many millions did you make denying access to health care to the black community? Michelle, why did you kick 20,000 black people out of their homes? That would open a whole can of worms, and I don't think black people are going to appreciate it when they find out how she exploited them for money in her professional career.
Now, obviously, you've put this movie and book out as a warning. I can't imagine you'd like to see Michelle Obama as the president in 2024. But if that happens, is that the end of this country? I mean, we've already had such a detrimental time. I mean, we're on the verge of possibly World War III. We've never had a puppet that is so apparent, that is so dementia-ridden, and so not in control. And when we have had puppets like George W. Bush, at least you had somebody competently evil behind them that was definitely doing something, aka Dick Cheney, Rumsfeld, Wolfowitz. You don't see that as much in this administration. Now, if Michelle Obama gets in, I think that she packs it not only with people that check boxes, but really outward authoritarians that are competent. And we could see an even worse situation than in 2024. So how do we combat that? And who do we combat that with if it's not Trump?
Look, Michelle has never had any original ideas of her own. She repeats things that she was taught by Bernardine Dohrn. If you look at her Twitter, she just repeats whatever the radical Democrat Party is saying. She just mimics what people say. I discovered in my research she has an underlying psychological condition she's actually talked about on film, on camera, called imposter syndrome. She says that she's always had imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is this idea that you actually pick it up in childhood, and it's an idea that an adult has that someone's going to find out that you don't deserve what you have. You don't have a right to be there. And Michelle, I think, developed it because her mother took her out of the all-black elementary schools, where it was a good school 1 block from where she lived called Dulles Elementary, but they had kids from the projects, and they didn't want to have their kids studying with black people. So they enrolled her at an exclusive gifted school with white kids. And I'm sure her parents told her, don't tell anybody that you don't belong here. You know, you don't want to get found out. And throughout her life, she's been in places and given positions like going to Princeton University with low test scores. She probably knew that she didn't probably belong there. And that's why she ran to the sociology department, because she got low grades at Princeton in her first semester. Sociology is relatively easy cop-out to go to Princeton University. And then she picked up an even easier major of African American studies, of all things, coming from a city with 1 million black people. Imagine going to Princeton and studying about African Americans. So she always was in places and positions she knew that she probably didn't earn them or deserve them. She worked for the mayor of Chicago because they needed black people to work there to abuse the black community, and they couldn't hire a white person. Same thing with the University of Chicago Medical Center. So I think as president, Michelle would try to please these group of radicals, try to please the globalist leaders to show that she belongs, that she deserves her position. So if she were president, I would be extremely worried that this agenda of the far left that's marched through the institutions, the entertainment business, the bureaucracies, the courts, the universities, they've just kind of taken over, and they impose this authoritarian agenda where you can't say anything different than them. You have to agree with everything they say. And for that the federal government then to adopt those policies would be very frightening and anti-American and anti-constitutional. But Michelle would, if you disagree with her, it's because you're racist or sexist. So we would be in a very bad world of hurt, I think, with another 4 years of the Obamas and possibly 8 years if Michelle wins. And I think the only hope is Donald Trump. And I think the only hope is to go after her core group of voters, which they need that 95% of black voters. But they think that Michelle can deliver those voters because of her being an African American. But she really is an Oreo, like the black kids called her growing up. She's black on the outside, but she's white on the inside. She never wanted anything to do with black people. She abused and exploited them for money. And she's putting on this whole phony show, which included, I even show in my film, whenever she would speak to a black audience when Barack was running for president, and even as first lady, she would put on a fake urban accent, a phony urban accent. You'd be charged with a hate crime today if you did that. But that's what she would do to fool black voters. And her father did it. That's what her father did. She pretty much followed in his footsteps. She tried to fool and trick black voters to vote for white liberals, even though they don't have your interests at heart. So I think it's, the final battle to preserve the Constitution and preserve America, because I think the Obamas have a completely different agenda. It goes back to their roots of their ideology through their association with Bernardine Dohrn and Bill Ayers, through Obama's ideological radicalization from a Soviet agent and Communist Party radical named Frank Marshall Davis in Hawaii. And I think my films reveal what the Obamas are truly up to.
Well, I just say this, you wouldn't be charged with a hate crime if your name was Hillary Clinton, because not only has she done that, I mean, the woman has broken out hot sauce on urban talk shows. I mean, that's the kind of people that we're dealing with. We got to take one more break. When we come back, I want to hone in on not only the authoritarianism, but the censorship that we've seen get out of control over the last several years. It's making sense of the madness. Remember to go check out Michelle Obama 2024, her real life story and plan for power over at Amazon right now. Back after this with the final segment.
Get more out of your AMP News experience with AMP Insider. With 7 pillars of focused information, including wealth strategies. Find comprehensive videos on understanding precious metals and start building wealth the right way. Support the mission of AMP with a subscription for $9.95 per month. Get the first month for $1 by using promo code AMP888.
Welcome to a new era of connecting patriots. AMP Insider.
Final segment with filmmaker Joel Gilbert. And Joel, you know more than anybody, it is very, very hard in independent media and filmmaking to get these messages out. It's really through people sharing the information, whether it be email campaigns or social media. However, over the last many years, we've gone from shadow banning to demonetization to deplatforming to debanking, and now even lawfare against free speech, where you see people like Owen Schroyer, for instance, going to prison. And I think it's only going to get worse. How do we combat that environment and get films like yours out there?
Look, the socialist, authoritarians, communists, they've always used authoritarian measures to force socialism and communism down the throats of people that don't want it. Socialism and communism are fantasies. They're political fantasies. It's an idea that written by Marx in the 1800s about how humanity can all live as zoo animals. We'll all look alike and sound alike, and everyone's going to be happy and get everything they need. It's a political fantasy. And whenever it's been applied to the real world, it's been a total disaster. And that's why authoritarian communist regimes like in Russia, in China, Stalin, Pol Pot in Vietnam, Mao, they've had to murder 100 million of their own citizens in peacetime because they wouldn't cooperate with this ridiculous fantasy that is Marxism and socialism. So we're seeing in America these same authoritarian efforts to prevent people from speaking their minds, from voting, from having their vote counted through ballot harvesting and sending out mail-in ballots. Here in California, everybody who's ever been registered gets a mail-in ballot. Here in San Fernando Valley, there's 1 million apartment buildings, 1 million apartments rather. So you can imagine how many people have moved out of those apartments over the years, but stacks of ballots are going to show up and somebody's going to dump them in a ballot box somewhere and fill them up. No one's going to know who filled them out. So socialism and communism, because they're failures, because as economic policies, social policies, government they bring misery. The only way to get people to vote for this and for it to survive is through authoritarian measures where you can't speak, where the people who oppose it are persecuted. And there's a long history of this persecution, and we're seeing it start in the United States. It's terrifying, and it's anti-American, and it's ultimately a failing strategy to undermine the United States of America and break it up. There can be no other goal of unlimited open border immigration other than the complete collapse of the United States and collapse of the Constitution. And we're unfortunately living through these times where there are concerted efforts on every level, as you mentioned, to destroy the fabric of the very successful United States of America that so many people enjoy and prosper in. And that's the tragedy of it. And if they succeed in silencing people that disagree with their authoritarian agenda, they may succeed.
We got a few minutes left. What would you like to leave the audience with?
Well, I think these are very dangerous times for the United States, for the future of the country, for the world, because you have an authoritarian gangsters that have taken over the government and are seeking to impose an agenda that nobody voted for, that nobody wants. No one supports inflation, open borders, all this radical nonsense. And the socialists know that no one would possibly vote for this nonsense. So their entire approach is authoritarian. But the next big challenge is understanding who Michelle Obama is, because I think she's coming. And as I said, if you go to salemnow.com, you can live stream the movie right now, also on Amazon Prime Video, and then Amazon for the DVD version and the book version. And you can really learn about who Michelle Obama is. She's no friend of the Black community. She's a total phony. She puts on fake accents. Everything she does is phony. She was on the top 25 international best dressed list in 2005. She used all the big designers on the Miracle Mile in Chicago. Maria Pinto, Income Goldman. She was so fashionable her whole life. I talked to her hairdresser, celebrity hairdresser she had at 18 years old. But when Michelle showed up to campaign for Barack in 2008, she didn't show up dressed in a designer dress and say, hey, I'm a Harvard lawyer just like my husband. She didn't want to do that. So she showed up, didn't comb her hair. She wore an old sweater and pretended to be this simple Black housewife from the 1950s. So everything Michelle does is manipulation. And she learned it from her father, who was a precinct captain, manipulating the Black community to vote for white liberals. She worked and abused and exploited the Black community, made people homeless, kicked them out of the hospitals in her professional career. And she's made a career of manipulating minorities. And I think that's the key. Their understanding of who Michelle Obama really is her biggest weakness. And that's why I want everyone to see the movie and read the book.
Well, I'll tell you what, if she indeed does announce in November, you'll be more ahead of the curve than anybody out there. And quite frankly, we need more people like you on the ground doing real independent investigative journalism, getting the interviews, getting the facts, not spreading wild conspiracy theories, because honestly, these stories are the important ones that show that these are really social climbing minions of a predator class that is trying to institute authoritarianism globally. Thank you so much, Joel Gilbert, for joining us. Everybody needs to go check out the film and book over at Amazon. And I want to thank you guys for joining us. Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern, Where the Truth Lives, ampnews.us. I absolutely love you guys, and I will see you all on the flip side.